Okay.
Now, I'm allowed to call you Etta. We did this in the taxi. So
and can I call you John?
You can call me John. That's a polite way. Many people use much other words. But you're the chair of the Philippine Human Rights Commission, which is a national human rights institution according to the Paris Principles. Therefore, you are impartial and to some extent independent of government. You've also been chairing the global network of institutions, the International Coordinating Committee. So when you say ICC, just so the audience knows, Etta doesn't mean the International Criminal Court, and she doesn't mean the International Chamber of Commerce either. It's the International Coordinating Committee of National Human Rights Institutions, if we get into the... Now, your commission already has a lot of engagement with companies. It's within your mandate that you can look at companies directly. And one interesting observation you've made already to me is that you think that European companies behave differently when they're in Asia to when they're here in Europe. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, it's sad, but it's true. You know, the developed world, which is Europe, North America, always pride themselves with having better and stronger regulatory mechanisms in government, and the rule of law is much more felt and enforced, rather than in developing countries where the state has weak regulatory mechanisms and there's a very thin middle class to make its demands properly to government to comply with the rule of law. I mean, this is a given all around. But our experience is that when transnational corporations, especially in extractive industries, go to the Philippines, for instance, and this is not just for the Philippines because we share it with Thailand and Myanmar. John calls it Burma, so I'll call it Burma too. We used to call it Burma all the time. And
I'm British, that's my problem.
Indonesia and so on. We share the same experiences about the problems of extractive industry. Some even call, or major developments that don't look into the implications of development insofar as the protection of natural resources are concerned and so on. Now, in the Philippines, mining companies by transnationals usually give us some problems. Problems to the communities, and specifically the indigenous peoples, because that's, they live in the mountains and mining takes place out there in the mountains. And the watershed, we believe that you should always be guided by the watershed principle. And we have, and so on and so forth. So some mining companies from Europe, from America, and even from Australia has been giving us a lot of problems because we know that the laws in their countries are, maybe superior to the laws that are in the Philippines at the moment, that we have still weak regulatory mechanisms. But that is not to take advantage of that and to take advantage of the fact that, government is not as strong and as strict and as capable as you would probably have it in your countries.
What kind of complaints do you get then about these mining companies?
Well, for instance, I'll take one. This is there's a lot of Swiss interests here. There's a lot of Australian interests in southern Mindanao. It's the Tampakan area. That's what we call it locally. It's open pit mining. It's supposed to be the biggest open pit mine in Asia. It's not yet in full operation. It's still just starting, but it's been on for so many years, and they've spent a lot of money on that already. A problem is that you have the watershed principle. You're not supposed to operate in areas where you've got major watersheds. So there are 4 major watersheds in that area, and yet they're into it. And government has not said, no, you're not supposed to do this. See, so there's that problem. At the local level, there's the local government that has an ordinance that prohibits open pit mining. Now, if there is a law that you are violating, even in local government, then you're not supposed to, operate, because you have to respect human rights, respect the rule of law, and so on and so forth. But they're just they
So it's
they
an
ignore.
impunity issue.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay. So what can we, if there's this perception or reality in the Philippines, and I've heard it in other places as well, we have the UN Guiding Principles agreed by the UN. The Philippines is part of the UN. I'm not sure if it's part of the Human Rights Council or not, but it's clearly supporting the UN Guiding Principles. Are the UN Guiding Principles enough? Are they not being applied in the right way? What can be done to create this level playing field?
Spread the good word around. Talk about the UN Guiding Principles. Have roundtable discussions such as what we are having right now. Get people to know and be aware of what these are. I liked your talk a while ago when you said they are foundational principles that are intended for all, whether it's for guiding principles or other legal measures, even including a legal binding treaty. You'd still have to talk about what it means to protect, respect, and come up with effective remedies when people and their environment are compromised.
And do you promote the UN Guiding Principles?
Yes, we've been doing that. It's relatively new. It's relatively new to us. But so far it's been very positive. If you don't mind, can I say a little something about it?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. That's why you're here.
Okay.
That's why you climbed up to this summit.
This pedestal.
The pedestal.
Looking down on them. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've altitude sickness up here.
So we've had 2 roundtable discussions. The first one was actually convened by ECO and the European Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, ECCP. The CEO is a friend of mine now, Marshall Beck. Okay, he's vice president. And Hans Seidel Foundation, that's a Stiftung in Germany, the more affluent Stiftung in Germany, but very friendly to us, helping us in security sector reforms. And then the Commission on Human Rights. So we got together. ECO came to my office, introduced itself to me, and I liked the idea. So we had a roundtable discussion last March 25. And just like what you said, they focused on just business and civil society groups. When I suggested, can we invite government? No, please, no, just business and civil society groups. But it was fine. It was dynamic, it was interesting. The civil society groups lashed out at businesses, and the local business was talking to me. The head of the Makati Business Club said, my God, it's as if we've never done anything good in the Philippines. So, but, everybody said, well, that's what democracy is all about, free expression. So the point is we engage. So there it was. And that was a promise for us to go on. That was March 25. We had a second roundtable discussion, and this was on June 5. This time, ECCP was out. We had invited ECCP as a guest. But the ones who convened it was the Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines, myself, and the Presidential Human Rights Committee. That's an organization that surfaced after Philip Alston of the UN Special Rapporteur on summary killings, extrajudicial, etc., came to visit. So we had that. So together we convened this, and it was even in the palace. That's the executive house, and we had a broad base of line agencies and government-controlled businesses that participated, and that was very interesting. Again, we invited ECCP, and he was pleasantly surprised to find out, everybody participated. They didn't know a thing about human rights and business, but they were interested to find out just how you can incorporate this into their programs and so on. So at the end of the day, before we parted, Marshall Beck from the chamber said, Etta, I'll invite the Philippine Chamber of Commerce, Do you know them? No, I don't have lunch with them, but I read them in the papers. But go ahead and invite them, and let's have more roundtable discussions, talking about the the UN guiding principles. I also want to mention that then we also had trade unions that wanted to talk about the Ecuadorian initiative,
Right.
yeah, on the legal and binding treaty. And I said, yeah, okay. So I mentioned that there was this initiative in the UN Human Rights Council. But after the discussion, because he was there, he was the more militant one, the trade union leader, he just said, can we do this amongst our workers, our worker organizations? Because I think it's helping us. So dialogue together and listening to each other, not being arrogant, being humble enough to know that we know, just our knowledge is limited. We can learn from each other. I think helps. So it has been relatively positive.
Oh, that's very encouraging. So the UNGPs are a useful tool for an organisation like yours in the Philippines. Let's move on to the ASEAN region more generally. We're going to be talking about textile sector, agriculture, and other sectors today. I know when I've worked in Southeast Asia, not so much in the Philippines, but in Myanmar and other places, there is this issue of competition for attracting foreign investment in the lower wage end. And I know for many people in this room, the issue of the living wage, for example, is a big issue in supply chains. And even Aung San Suu Kyi in the Myanmar context has been quite active in promoting the need for tax holidays and export processing zones, etc., and sees the need to bring jobs to Myanmar and investment to Myanmar. Some quick wins to justify the democratization of the country, etc. Now, that can sometimes run counter to human rights and living wages and collective bargaining, etc. What's your view on this? Do you work collaboratively with your counterparts across Southeast Asia, or are you actually in competition to some extent?
Well, I guess if you talk about the NHRIs together, this is in Southeast Asia, definitely we have a level playing field. We understand each other. We understand the right to, real wages. We understand the right to security of tenure. We understand the right to decent wages and not just any run-of-the-mill, type of employment. So at that level, we understand each other. But I'm not sure about our governments and their policies with respect to wages. Of course, theoretically, you'll always hear governments talk about the right to work and how they try to protect labor. But that kind of competition to get foreign investments coming in by providing cheaper labor, to me, is very sad and unfortunate. Because as it is, a lot of our workers are underpaid and live in, many of them, even in subhuman conditions. We talk about child labor, that's another issue. And I don't think that at this stage of the game, when you talk about ASEAN economic integration, it'll be very difficult for them to do this. But it's a challenge that we must address, not just domestically in the Philippines, but I think we have to think of it in terms of the sub-region of Southeast Asia. Cheaper wages is a big thing, to take in foreign investments.
What advice would you give any Dutch company or Dutch company that's either thinking of investing in Southeast Asia or has a supply chain in the Philippines or Southeast Asia? What are the kind of key messages?
The key messages would really be, putting into practice business and human rights, or human rights and business. Because it's really all about, if you want, I always say that businesses that thrive and prosper in long-term, strategic terms, are businesses that are accepted by the people. And this kind of businesses are those that respect the rights of the people, the rights of the consumers, the rights of the market. Because we are the market. And they have to respect our rights to be acceptable and legitimate. So it's good business to respect human rights. And I think that if you have good laws here, then for heaven's sakes, will you please bring them to the developing countries and enforce these laws. I think the principle of extraterritoriality should in fact be, I hope, enforced and encouraged between the host governments, the governments of origin and the host governments that accept these foreign investors and these big companies.
And I know you're going to be having some in chats with the Dutch National Contact Point today, and I mean the relationship between national human rights institutions around the world and national contact points in the OECD is an interesting one, because you're kind of in a similar space, I think. I have one last question, but
Then pass for the
yeah, who's going to win the World Cup?
England.
Yes,
Okay, just